guys, this is Laurel of the Dabbling Hook, and I don't have a lot of finished items. It's been a very crochet light week, so I figured I'd do a little demonstration of sorts. So I've mentioned in my patterns or on the videos that I like to use the slip stitch for the brim. I think it's more forgiving, it has more elasticity, more memory. So it's my preferred method for doing brims. It's either that or the single crochet usually. I tend not to do the half double that much. Just doesn't work for me. So I decided I would just show how I do mine. I don't think it's any different than anybody else, but what I like about it is it has a little curve on it, which reminds me of what is that? The knitted, I think the tubular cast on, where it just has that rounded edge. So the way I work it, one edge looks rounded and one edge looks like it flares out a little, but when you put the whole piece together, it does, the rounded part is what shows. So I've been working on just a sample here. So when I do my when I do the slip stitches, I chain one, turn, and I go in the back loop of every stitch. Every stitch, that is, except the last one. In the last one, I always go under both. So not just the front or the back, I go under both and slip stitch. Right? And that's for every row. The first one and every one up to the last stitch, you go to the back loop, and then the last one you go into both. You turn and you repeat the same. And what works for me also, oh, the other thing is try to make your stitches as loose, but not too loose and floppy. Loose enough that it'll be easy to go into, because it's our tendency is to always pull tight on the stitches, and sometimes we do it without even noticing, but try to keep it loose and relaxed. That way it's easy to go into for the next row. Then the other thing I like to do is my last row, the working yarn has to be on the opposite end of the beginning. I find that works best for me, and it helps in the curve placement. Okay, so you end on this side, your beginning one is on the opposite end. Okay, so if this is your last one, you don't chain. What you do is you bring the beginning end together. So basically you're going to seam up, which is pretty standard. You're going to seam up the short side. Now, most people would just start and go into, go into the first one here, and it seems a little tight. Use your fingers and wiggle that in, and then they would go into the opposite stitch. And I'm doing a slip stitch to close them. Some people do a single crochet. Some people would use needle and thread and close it. I like the slip stitch. But what I do first, which for some might be a little time consuming, but again, I find that it helps. If you look at the end, there are two sides to it. There's this side here and a little nubby side here. I didn't chain one. I just take my hook and I use my finger and I go into that front nub. And like I said, sometimes it could be a little tight. And I pull through, oops, and I pull through. Oh. I go into the side of the nub and I pull through and tighten it. Okay, now the reason I do that is I find that when you just go into the first stitches right off, it leaves a little bit of a gap or a divot at the start. So I like to do that first, so it really does a clean join to me. If it's too difficult for anyone, you can skip that. And then you start doing your regular slip stitch. So you would go into the first stitch, and again, if it's tight, make sure you grab both loops. When I start, I always go into the back bump, so I always have that clean edge, so it's easy to go under both loops. If you do the traditional way and just go under, you know, you pick up that first row the traditional way, then you would have one loop at the end, and you can go under that, right? And then make sure you match up. So this is the first, and again, I use my fingers a lot to get in there. This is the first, and the first one's always a little tight, and I slip stitch, and then go into the next one and just continue on. Make sure you're matching one for one, and if you're not sure, usually I don't have that much trouble with it. Of course, now I'm trying to show you I do. If you're not sure, make sure you count back from the end to where you're working to make sure you're still on track. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 left here. 1, 2, 3, 4 left here, just so you don't get all wonky and miss a stitch. And okay, I'm at the last one, and it's a little tight again, and typically it's not that tight, but of course, like I said, I needed to show you, so everything's working against me. All right, so this is what it looks like. It's a little raised, and especially since this is a number 6 yarn, it's a little more raised. I've seen where folks do the slip stitch and leave this as the front side. I don't like that. It's got the raise, and I pulled my stitch, stretched my stitch a little. So if you look here, you can see how this end is a little curving out, and this is like the rolled edge. Now when you flip it, what you're going to get, oops, I flipped it the wrong way. Okay. Now when you flip it, that flares at the top, and then that rolled edge is at the bottom. And that's what I like. And then you can just continue and pick up your stitches on the edge as normal. Okay. All right. And when I pick up stitches on the edge, I like to make sure I have 2 loops instead of just going under one, where to me it tends to stretch. I would go under this one here, and then I would find somewhere where I could pick up a second strand, and I have 2. Oh, I forgot to chain 1 at the beginning here, but we're just showing. And then for the second one, I go under this bar here, and again, I have to use my fingers. And this, I will admit, it takes just a little bit longer to, you know, go under those extra stitches, but I think it's worth it. So I go under that bar, and then I go under this here. So I always have 2 here. So again, I go under this right here, and then I try to pick up this bar in the back. And then for the next one, I go under this bar here, and I use my finger to help me because it's a little snug. And then I go in between here, so there are 2 strands always. And I think it's just neater. There's less stretch that happens on that first row, and it's not as noticeable. So yeah, that is how I do my slip stitch, and you see that curve. I love that. Nice, neat curve without, now if you did it the other way, you might end up getting this little, I don't know, messy edge, I call it, with this little upward flare. But yep, I like that better. So hopefully that made sense. Let me know if it doesn't, and I will try to clarify. But that is my slip stitch brim, and I do prefer that. It stretches, and after wash I find that it comes back. It has more memory than any of the other brims. So all right, I hope you guys find this useful, and I will talk to you later. Bye.